Yes. Okay. Am I getting an echo? Can I speak?
I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. All right. For readers that don't want to die, for readers who think it's more important to live than to be a loyal Democrat, all you have to do is look at the results of Didier Raoult and of doctors in the U.S., the head of the Lupus Society. I could name, if I had an hour, I could look up doctors. In the United States, hydroxychloroquine is the most prescribed medication now. So even though the LA Times and the Democrats and Rick don't like it, it turns out that the world's foremost virologist, Didier Raoult, and most American doctors are using it. And they're getting, Raoult didn't study 160 French people. He's studying thousands of French people. He's done the most widespread studies of it. In New York, there are doctors that are combining it with Z-Pak and zinc. So there are people in New York that are testing thousands of people. So this goes well beyond the propaganda that poor Rick is a victim of. So my point is this, Rick. If you can't just tell me, oh, Didier Raoult does sloppy studies because you read it in the LA Times. You have to actually know what these studies are. You haven't even read his studies. I've read his studies. You don't have to be a virologist. As I said last week, one of the main criticisms that brainwashed people have is they say, well, we need lots and lots more studies. That's not the case when you find a virus. One of the things that Didier Raoult says, who's the foremost virologist, is that when you found something that is able to contain or lower the viral load, you don't have to do it 50,000 times. It only has to work, I don't know, 1,000 times before you know it's going to keep working. It's not like trying to figure out if jogging helps cancer. You'd have to study 500,000 people to figure that out. With a virus, you identify the virus, you identify if there's something that can contain it. Now, the second thing is this. It turns out that even if hydroxychloroquine had only excellent results, which it does, Didier Raoult said that he's curing 3 times more people than normal procedures would cure. All right? Nothing can cure you if you come into the hospital critical. Okay? So it's very important that Rick understands this. What the virus does is it attacks the lungs. The lungs inflame and they get torn up. So the lungs' immune system tears up the lungs. If you go into the hospital and you're already in that condition, hydroxychloroquine won't save you. It'll have no effect because your lungs don't work anymore. So yes, Rick, there are a lot of people that are already at death's door. Their lungs are wrecked by the virus and the lungs inflammation because of it. And so you have to use the hydroxychloroquine when the illness is only medium. Once it's once it's damaged the lungs, it doesn't work.
All right. So okay, a couple things. They're trying all sorts of shit. There's some other antibiotic that is promising, and hydroxychloroquine. It seems. I mean, it's promising. It seems to deliver okayish results sometimes. I mean, it's one of a number of drugs that are being checked out, and some have good results. And yeah, it makes sense that it's going to be more effective, if it's going to be effective at all, in people who are not yet as sick, though studies have been halted in Brazil and other places because it does cause arrhythmias in some people. Now Carol, I told you, went to the bouncy house and they handed her swab via one of those gripper things that old people use so they don't have to bend over. So anyway, she turns in her swab or whatever she used, and they say it's going to be 7 to 10 days before she gets results. And it's like, which would freak me out if we were worried. We weren't that worried because this cough doesn't seem to be fucking her up that bad. But like, luckily, she got her results in 2 days instead of 7 to 10 days. But you know, I would buy your argument more if testing were better in this fucking country. We're still only testing less than 1 American in 2,000 every day. And then when people get tested, there's a whole range of times it takes to get the results back. So in some cases, I mean, in cities where it's bad, in a lot of fucking cases, you know, people don't start getting treated for the shit, you know, until they're pretty far along. Now, there can be, you know, that can maybe be addressed if there's adequate drugs to try on people and that they know might have a decent chance of working on people. So, you know, if there's enough drugs to go around, and if the drugs are safe, which I mean, I've read various things. You've read the same shit. Some people say it's safe if you use it for less than 10 days. Other people say, no, well, some people have, I don't know. Anyway, if there's a safe way to use drugs that are pretty effective, then maybe you have to start giving, when you turn in your test, or even if you don't get a test because there's not enough testing, maybe you can go someplace and they'll give you like a sample pack of 5 days of the shit or some other shit that is supposed to be effective, and you start taking it on the chance that you have the shit. We know from all this testing that on average across the U.S., roughly about 1 person in 5 who gets tested turns out to have coronavirus. But maybe you give the drugs prophylactically to all 5 out of 5, so that when the people turn up positive for the shit, they've already, you know, anyway, you know what I'm fucking saying, right?
Okay. Yeah. I would just like to say I'm looking for the name of something. It's called, hang on for a second. There are 3 more things that I'd like to mention. We got a question about what are some cures for coronavirus, and
okay, all right, got you, fucking got you. Okay.
All right. There are 3 more possible cures. Now, one of the reasons there are 2 reasons. You gotta mute. I'm getting an echo.
Oh wait, it unmuted when it was. Hold on. Sorry. Fucking. Hold on. Fucking.
All right. So there are 2 reasons that we're even having this argument. The first reason is that the most ominous thing I found in this whole pandemic and crisis is that the Democrats don't want there to be a cure. They want people to be frightened out of their minds and not believe that there's a cure. Maybe they do want there to be a cure, but they don't want people to know about it. They're creating panic and hysteria. And so I'm trying to prove to Rick that hydroxychloroquine works and that he's being brainwashed. There are also, I've been talking about there are now 4 other cures, all right? One of them is called Resdemivir. I can't find the exact name. It starts with an R, Res something avir. They started using that in China. They're still using it. They're still testing it in America. They say it's very promising. There's something they started using in Italy called Actemorol, and they're doing pretty well with that. They found out that that the typical thing where you use antibodies that works with many, many viruses for hundreds of years, where you use the antibodies that the body's already created, that turns out to be something that will almost certainly work if they can get enough of it, and a reservoir of it, if they can get it from people that have had it. And finally, it turns out, this is a really weird thing, they found out that if they lie people on their stomach, instead of lying them on their back, it's called proning, it actually helps the lungs keep the patient breathing, so they don't have to go on one of those machines that helps you breathe. That Mayor Cuomo said he needed 40,000 respirators. What are they called? I forgot. Ventilators. Anyway, yeah. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this: we're doing pretty damn well with testing. I don't know. I mean, Rick, the United States is not a massive testing facility for coronavirus. In a matter of 4 weeks, we've gone from 75,000 tests a week to 150,000 tests a day. We've already tested about 4 million Americans. We've tested more, Trump announced this today, we've tested more people in America than the other 6 countries combined on the list. Of the top 7 countries, we've tested more than the rest of the world. So Trump is doing an excellent job, or basically American science is doing an excellent job of testing. And it's got, a long way to go before we test every single human being, but we're doing very well. Now, there's a reason I'm bringing this up. This is the last thing I'm going to say, then I'll go to you. Your party, the Democrats, don't want you to think that there's a cure for this. They don't want you to think that this is basically a semi-worse flu. They want you, and I suspect I know why, but it is my belief that the Democrats want you to think that this is a deadly pandemic, far worse than a normal flu, and that there's no cure. Because they want to frighten you. Because they're trying to create a crisis that, in my opinion, will destroy the Trump presidency. And the reason is that they're more afraid of Trump than they are of the disease. They think it would be better to destroy the economy and have Trump lose than have everything going swimmingly like it was before. That is my opinion. Go ahead.
Am I fucking muted or fucking not?
You're okay now.
All right, all right. So, if the economy were being destroyed, the stock market dropped by 30% in the early days. It's come back nearly half. So if the people who are worried about the economy, Wall Street, were that fucking worried, that the market would be down more than 16%. It's been bouncing back up hundreds of points a day, a lot of days. So people have confidence that the economy is not going to be destroyed. As far as testing, we're roughly 40th in the world among nations and territories in per capita testing. And you'd expect from one of the most advanced countries in the world that we'd be doing a less shitty job of testing. And I know that because we have a large population, we have 300 and almost 30 million people in the country, which is roughly 5 or 6 times the population of every European country. So it's tougher to, in terms of raw numbers, to test for our population, but it also means we have more fucking people in this country to do the testing. And we're still only at 1.1% of the population, which would be adequate if we started testing in February, when a lot of people knew that this fucking shit had the potential to fuck everything up. But testing didn't really kick in decent numbers until like in March, we were still testing fewer than 1,000 people a day in the whole fucking country. And we didn't break 10,000 tests a day in this country until a month ago. So by then, hundreds of thousands of people. Right now in this country, we probably have close to 1 million people who have it, but haven't been tested. We've done a lot of tests because we have a lot of people, but in per capita numbers, we're shit. But one thing we can start thinking about as we get more evidence. It made sense to do a nationwide, everybody shelter in place. Now that we've been doing it for a few, now the argument everybody knew the conservatives would make would be that shelter in place would keep the numbers, you can't say within reason, because we've lost 40,000 people or so far. Which is Grand Junction, Colorado, York, Pennsylvania. It's the entire population of a town gone.
What? York, Pennsylvania is gone?
It's the equivalent of wiping a mid-sized, not a small to mid-sized town off the map. I looked up a bunch of towns that Muskogee, Hackensack. To think about it. I grew up in a town roughly that size, and that it's like that town being wiped out. Of course, no, it's distributed across the U.S. I'm just saying but anyway. Now I forgot. Oh, the point is the numbers have been kept, through this week to several tens of thousands of deaths. And Trump said it himself, that if nobody did anything and just let it go hog wild, we might have seen between 1.5 and 2 million deaths, which obviously nobody's going to let it go hog wild. But everybody knew that if we did social distancing and kept the numbers lower than the worst case scenarios, you guys would say, well, you did it for no good reason. You did it for just this many people. Because look at how few people have died. And the more reasonable argument is, look at how many people potentially didn't die. When you compare the numbers that even came out of Trump's mouth, of millions, to us being at 40,000 right now, it's a legit argument that social distancing has prevented a lot of death. And it also makes sense. It doesn't make sense to let everybody just go completely wild, but it does make sense. Pro sports is trying to figure out how to bring sports back. They're already playing baseball in Japan, pro baseball, to empty stadiums. There are plans being looked at. There's a lot of shit that can be done, and it makes sense to figure out how we're going to open up the country. And even the White House, even the Trump White House, issued a set of, not really guidelines yet, but suggestions for thinking about guidelines as to, with stages of when we can consider like opening up restaurants and all this shit. So it's not that everything needs to be kept completely shut down for month after month after month. But we can figure out how to do shit. Go ahead.
All right. So my response is that we've tested millions of Americans. I think we're doing plenty of testing. The testing is getting faster and faster. One of the reasons that that affects that per capita thing, the per capita number, is that testing has advanced since we started this virus. In the past 4 weeks, companies have come up with tests that used to take 10 days that now take 15 minutes. So we didn't have the technology to really cut into a population of 330 million people. So now we've got a test that can test people in 15 minutes, Rick. And we are working on testing hundreds of thousands of people per day, I think, per week. And eventually we'll do tremendous numbers of testing. I think we're working as fast as we possibly can. I can hear an echo. You're not letting me speak. Okay. Oh, it's you. All right. No, I've got more to say. The final question I have for Rick, and this is Dennis Prager asked this question, so it's not mine, but I thought it was brilliant. Of the 33,000 people that have been killed, of the 40,000, we'll say 40,000, half of them have been from New York. So if the United States had a virus that was killing people from Texas to Montana, and this virus was taking place in Idaho, South Dakota, Nebraska, and it had wound up in 6 weeks killing 20,000 people. Do you think we would have locked down all 50 states, Rick? You think we would have locked down everywhere from Alaska to Florida? I think, in other words, the point is this lockdown has occurred because it happened between the corridor of Washington, D.C. and New York City. They wouldn't have given a flying fuck if it had happened in Montana, Nebraska. This is a New York, Washington, D.C. centralized disease that the rest of the United States should never have been shut down for.
You might remember that the first big outbreak was in Washington State, which is about as far from Washington, D.C. as you can get within the continental U.S. 9 states have had more than 1,000 virus fatalities so far.
Meaningless.
What?
It's meaningless.
Why? There are 1,000 dead people?
How many people died from car accidents, Rick? How about heart attack and cancer?
The argument against that, because we learned that that's a bullshit argument when Dr. Phil went on fucking Laura Ingram's show and talked about all the, that we didn't lock down the country to stop car wrecks. Car wrecks aren't fucking contagious. Dying in a swimming pool, not contagious. You've got
flu. What about flu?
Flu contagious, but
you don't lock down the United States.
And every fucking year there's a huge push to get vaccinated. We develop a vaccine. It's an anticipatory vaccine. They gather all the data they can from around the world, and they try to guess which strains of flu are coming, and they ahead of time they fucking come up with tens of millions, hundreds of millions of doses, and they try to get everybody fucking
We know
vaccinated.
that, Rick. We know that.
Yeah, but so, I mean, it's not
That's why I used it as an example.
So, but, I mean, at this point, there are only 3 states in the country that have fewer than 500 cases. There are only 8 states in the country that have less than 1,400 cases of this shit.
Okay, they shouldn't be locked down. We should quarantine New York if we're going to quarantine anywhere and let the rest of the country go back to their lives.
Well,
should we change subjects now? That's all I have to say.
Yeah, so let me just say one more thing, which is, you can figure out, it was a blunt instrument at first in March, closing shit down, but now there's room for finesse and different degrees of being safe from this shit, and there's all sorts of, so we can start figuring out how to, if there are places where people can, within reason, go back to restaurants. If you're in, I don't know, fucking Hawaii's a nice place to go out to dinner. Hawaii's only had 580 confirmed cases. So
why are they locked down, Rick?
So, well, maybe they can work on that. How many? Let's see. Hold on. Hawaii's they have good, decent testing per capita. So maybe you can go out to dinner in Hawaii. Maybe they reduce. Some people have suggested dropping the occupancy for restaurants by a while. So everybody, you're never, every other table is occupied, and maybe everybody working in the kitchen is wearing a mask and gloves. It's a sweaty thing, but fucking kitchens are sweaty anyway. But if that lets you operate your restaurant, then maybe it's a thing to do. All this shit is open to analysis and people coming up with solutions. It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Okay. All right. I'd just like to say, as of this filming, the little tin pot Democrat dictator of Los Angeles has shut down Los Angeles. He's not even going to open it up to a slight degree for 3 weeks, for almost a month. Almost a month. And he's planning on opening up LA the same time that New York's going to open up. And New York has 100 times as many cases. In the whole of Los Angeles, we've only had about 300 deaths. And he wants to keep this city shut down for another month.
The mayor of Los Angeles has a press conference every day, and he fields questions. And among the questions he fields are like, can't we open up this shit a little bit and let's see what he says?
He's already said it. He wanted the city of LA locked down till May 15th. That's almost a month from now.
So does it stay that way? Do the numbers support that?
No, because he's crazy. And I knew he was crazy. I'm smarter than the mayor. I'm an art teacher, and I'm smarter than the mayor.
Well, let's see. Let's see if he continues being crazy, or what, as you call it.
So let's change the subject. I want to talk about something else. Here.
Okay.
Yourself. So this is very interesting. It's a different subject, Rick. That not only does hydroxychloroquine work, even though it's hard for you to accept, but also it turns out that Trump didn't collude with Russia, because this week the Inspector General report was unredacted. It turns out this week that according to the Inspector General's report, there were many footnotes that were classified, and they were opened up. I don't know what the word for it is. I said unredacted. So they opened up new facts about the Mueller investigation, and it turns out that in January, of 2017, that is right after Trump took office, the FBI knew, and because Rick is going to say, I want to see the document, I think you're making this up. Well, I actually have the document, Rick. I have the document, okay? I have it, and you can read it if you want. Footnote number 347 states that the Russians actually supported Hillary Clinton. The FBI was aware of this, and the FBI knew that the Steele dossier was probably a Russian disinformation campaign, and that Steele was probably consciously or unconsciously working to disseminate Russian intelligence. So it actually turns out, here, Rick, since you never believe anything I say, I have to actually find you the document, whereas you can just sit there and do nothing. I found you the document. It's look it up. The IG report unredacted footnotes are in Just the News. I'll send you the link. How about that? I'll send you the link. Copy. And now, well, you can shut down while we're talking, or you can respond. Let me send you the link, or we can shut down. What do you want to do, Director? Director?
No, shut it down. I got to read this thing. Are we both talking here? Can you hear me?
Rolling.
Hello.
So go ahead, Rick.
Can you hear me? Am I not muted?
You're fine, Rick.
Okay, so this is especially to look at footnote 347 to the Mueller report. The FBI received information in early June 2017, which revealed that, among other things, there were personal and business ties between the subsource, that's the Russian guy, the highly placed Russian, was he an officer at the time? Was he an ex-Russian? Was he in the government at the time that Steele talked to him, or was he done and just kind of, do we know? He was a Russian.
Russian intelligence service. Wherever you read this footnotes, wherever it says RIS, it means Russian intelligence service.
No, but this is subsource. This is a Russian guy that Steele talked to.
The subsource is Russian government.
Is one guy in the Russian government that Steele talked to. So there were personal business ties between the Russian guy and Steele's between the subsource and Steele's primary subsource, contacts between the subsource and an individual in the Russian presidential administration in 2016, and the subsource, and then a bunch of redacted still, and the subsource voicing strong support for candidate Clinton in the 2016 U.S. elections. The supervisory intel analyst told us that the FBI did not have, anyway, so there's one Russian guy says he likes Hillary for president. It doesn't mean the whole fucking Russian government likes Hillary for president, according to your footnote here.
Hey, Rick, I'll explain this to you because we don't have time for you to read the whole thing. It just isn't possible, okay?
Yeah,
if you want, you can read it during the week. You can spend hours reading everything about it. But right now, wait, I'm getting an echo.
Keep going.
So basically, Rick, there are about 40 unredacted footnotes to the Inspector General's report. And in a variety of ways, they say the same thing. You'd have to read them all. They say that the Steele report was basically written by Russian intelligence. Whenever it says subsource or RIS as a source for Christopher Steele, what it's saying is that what he's writing is coming from Russian intelligence. That's number one. Number two, according to footnote 347, one of his sources expressed strong support for Hillary Clinton. And finally, the FBI, in one of the previous footnotes above number 347, they go on down to 389. There are a lot of footnotes. But in one of them, the FBI, in several of them, the FBI admits that nothing in the Steele dossier was untainted with Russian espionage. And they felt that they admitted, they knew, the FBI knew, as they were asking for a warrant to spy on Trump, they knew that the dossier was probably Russian misinformation. It was probably a Russian attempt to smear Trump. So it doesn't really matter what you think of those subsources. What matters is the FBI knew they were Russian, that they were going to get a warrant on Trump based on Russian intelligence, and that they had no reason to believe any of it was credible. And the entire investigation of Trump was based on a lie, and that the entire Mueller investigation, which continued for another 3 years, was aware of this. They were aware that the Steele dossier was Russian misinformation because that's what the FBI was aware of. So your whole world that depends on you believing that Trump colluded with Russia turned out this week to be a complete lie. Now, please respond. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
All right. So, all right. I'll read more of this shit and analysis of this shit over the coming week. Just all I got. I mean, okay. So, like, let's say the dossier was Russian bullshit, but I'll read analysis. Let's not argue about that. I'll give it to you pending me reading more shit about that. All I have to say about this whole thing is that the footnote you gave to me, in my reading of it, says that just one guy that Steele talked to said he liked Hillary Clinton for president. So one Russian guy. So that, and we don't have to, like, we can wrap it up. I'm giving you that the dossier was Russian bullshit, pending me reading stuff but as far as the footnote you gave me, it just says one guy.
Okay, Rick. Rick, the implications are far more serious than one guy. Okay, this is a person that worked.
Yeah, I'm giving you that this. I'm pending me reading more shit. Okay. I'm giving you the whole deal that the Steele dossier was all just a Russian fucking was all Russian bullshit. Just so take the victory there, and don't fight me on the fucking footnote because we have to wrap up because nobody wants to hear us argue about I'm giving you the fucking points on this. I shouldn't, but I am. So just take it and then let's wrap up and reconvene next week. Okay,
but what I'm saying is this. I appreciate that you give me this. I've been trying for 3 years, but I appreciate that you're giving me this. That's great. But are you willing to say now that the whole Mueller investigation was based on the Steele dossier? The whole FBI spying on Trump was based on the Steele dossier. Your whole reason for believing that Trump was colluding with Russia no longer exists. Will you admit that Trump did not collude with Russia?
Well, you keep trying to say that I'm saying that Trump colluded with Russia. And I think I've said, probably 100 times that I wouldn't characterize it as collusion. because I like to say, and then you get all mad and shit, and I don't want to have this fucking argument again, is that we know what Trump is like. Trump is a vain guy. Trump is a windbag. I mean, and Trump, I believe, this is what I fucking believe, that Trump is subject, now you hate when I say this, but let's not have the fucking argument. I don't believe Trump colluded with Russia in the sense of fucking colluded. I do believe that Trump was manipulated by Russia. And you like to say that that's the same thing, and da-da-da-da-da, but the fucking deal is Trump is a buffoon in a lot of ways. Now, maybe he's got some secret genius that makes him an effective president in the minds of a lot of people. But he's got a lot of buffoony qualities. And I believe, personally, it's my personal belief, that his being a buffoon means he can be manipulated on the basis of flattery and vanity and possible financial inducements. Does it mean that he colluded with Russia? That he got together with Putin? No. And I don't think I've ever really strongly argued that that was the case. I'm mostly arguing that he's a buffoon and is subject to the same kind of shit that happens to buffoons in movies about motherfucking buffoons. Hold on.
Okay, Rick, for 3 years now, since the election of 2016, you've been telling me that you had evidence that Trump colluded with Russia. And as the proof comes out month after month that you are bigoted, unfair, and lying about something you have no evidence for, you keep trying to convince the audience that what you said isn't really what you meant. And I've been saying for 4 years, since 2016, can you please prove to me that Trump colluded with Russia? Now, let me explain. There are people watching this that are not stupid. I know you have a high IQ, but there are millions of viewers now that have been watching this for 4 years, for 3 years. And they know that you've been trying to say that Trump was colluding with Russia. You change the wording here and there, but it always comes out the same. In fact, you get very emotional about it.
Change the wording. You characterize what I believe as me saying that, now maybe early on, I know we've been doing this now for more than 3 years. Maybe early on, I believed more strongly that there was collusion between Trump and Russia. But for years now, I've been saying it's not fucking collusion, it's Trump being manipulated. The Trump having a favorable view of some shit about Russia because Trump was fucking in financial bed with Russian oligarchs, and that's now we can get into it, but I don't fucking want to. That the Mueller report had 2 parts. It had the collusion with Russia half, and the second half was obstruction of justice. I don't want to fucking argue about that anymore. I'll read more about this shit, but I said what I believe. And it's something that I've believed now for at least 2.5 of the 3+ years we've been doing this. So you can call it what I believe collusion, but that's a mischaracterization of what I believe. It's not collusion. It's manipulation by. It's Trump being Trump, and thus being subject to palsy-wowsy, flattery and business deals and how, fucking beauty pageants in Moscow and the whole fucking bit. Trump is, a lot of business is done on the basis of business friendships. And I would say that Trump was at least attempting to have a business friendship with Russia that probably colored some of his fucking decisions. That's not collusion. That's Trump being Trump and Russia being Russia. And so, I don't know how many times I can say what I believe.
Okay, Rick. Rick, I want you to prove that. I'm going to say what I always say. If before you go slandering somebody, before you this is the thing that I don't like. When I lose my temper, when I get angry, it's because you're not being fair. You would give more fairness to any other human being, but because the Democrats have made you hate Trump, you have not provided one shred of proof that Trump was colluding with Russia. Nothing. Not a shred of proof. I want to see proof. Because when you say that someone is a traitor to their country, you have to prove that. Now, no one in this audience, no one watching you, has ever seen you come up with a single shred of proof.
Why do you keep saying colluding when I keep saying it's not fucking collusion? It's not fucking collusion, you dipshit. Fuck off, Lance. You can call it what I believe collusion 100 million times, but I don't call it collusion. Maybe I did 3 years ago.
You did. You've been saying collusion for years.
3 motherfucking years later, and I'm saying Trump was manipulated by Russia. I'm being shut down. I'm hanging up.
You said collusion.
You're yelling at me to shut. I'm hanging up.
You said collusion. You said collusion.
Shut up, fucking Lance. I gotta hang up.
You said it in the hospital. You said it for years. Good night.